So we're going to start with a little overview of 5D and a little bit of background to this resource as well. So the origins of this book come from a resource that was created by Tier Fund, and it was a resource called Discovery, and it was designed as a way of encouraging and inspiring churches to be really active in their communities and to think about community transformation. So in a sense, we're building on their shoulders today, and we're really grateful for their generosity in allowing us to take that material and to sort of repurpose it and add new bits to it. So that's really wonderful. This is about community transformation. That's what it's all about. It's about seeing transformation happening in the places where we live, in the places that we work, in the places that we connect with people. And when we talk about community transformation, it's so important to remind ourselves that that is about not just about us swooping in with our grand ideas about things that we want to do and just running on with those things. It's about actually empowering the communities and empowering people and groups themselves. And in doing so, it's therefore about helping you and your church to find your role within your community and helping you to fulfill your purpose as you journey with the people in your community. So within the book as well, we have contributions and stories from Tier Fund, who have shown how community transformation happens around the world and what we can learn as a UK church from what's been happening in different countries. Also contributions from CAP UK, who we're just, I think as a country, we're so grateful for CAP and the impact they've had on the local church. So it's great to hear, and we'll hear a bit from CAP later about how they've seen transformation through their networks. Gather UK, as Andy introduced as well, and what they're doing to encourage unity across the churches. And there's some contributions in the book from them too. And then Acts Trust locally, just to give some local stories too. So let's look at a 5D overview of what the 5Ds actually are, which I'm sure you know now. I'm sure you've read them. So here we have the 5Ds. Discern, which is all about our understanding. Discover, talking and listening, really beginning to explore our communities. Dreaming, where we begin to prayerfully imagine what could be. Designing, using some of that strategic element to bring forth a really good action plan. And then delivering, which is where we crack on and we start to launch and see things happening. Now, in essence, this is not a new formula. We can't claim that we've come up with this brand new thing because, in effect, this is what we all do naturally with a lot of the things that we are involved with, projects that we launch, things that we do. We may not have seen it in this way, but in essence, it's not a new formula. But we introduced in this concept to help bring this strategic thinking to underpin the work that we do. What I've seen many times, and I think I've been guilty of this before, is we've started with dream. I've got a great idea. What about if we did this? And then we've jumped straight to deliver. We've cracked on and we've done it. And it sounds great. You know, we've been inspired by an idea and we've cracked on and done it. And sometimes there's a need to just hit the ground running and make it up as we go. But what this is encouraging us to do is to take a step back and ask some really important questions first. First of all, do we really understand what we mean by poverty? Do we really understand what the role of the church should be in the community? Do we really understand about relationship with the community and empowerment? And have we really thought about discovering, this might be my idea, but what do other people think as well? How does my views match up with what else is happening? And design, have we really thought through a really good process so that what we decide to run with is sustainable and is going to stand the test of time? So this framework helps you to ask the right questions. It's also not rigid. It's not a singular pathway. You can pick and choose. The book's got so many great activities, and there might be certain elements depending on what season you're in your church and where you are. This is where we're at the moment. This is some stuff that we can pick from. And it also can be circular. You know, we don't end with deliver. We're constantly in this renewal cycle of let's learn more, let's revise and refresh ourselves. So how do we use this resource? The key thing is about how you is about thinking first about how you might organize yourselves into groups, and there are 2 stages. The first 3Ds are that sort of exploration stage where you're learning and discovering and talking. The second 2 are more about mobilization, where you begin to create and run with things. So how can you organize yourself? When you go back to your hometown, to your home church, how will you organize yourselves? It's important to think about who's in your group. What skills do people come with? Who do you want to have around the table? Who has the passions? Who has the skills that you might want in your groups? And there's some great stuff in the books about how you can think through some of those skills that you might need. And also demographics. Are you being representational of your community in the demographic of your group? That when you are designing what you're going to run with and the things that you want to bring into your community, who is owning that, and is it representative of your communities? Ultimately, I would say a key message is this: transformation is done by people, not to people. Transformation is done by people and not to people. There's a great organization called the Poverty Truth Commission, and they have a wonderful slogan, which is this: anything about us, without us, is not for us. Anything about us, without us, is not for us. So who is in your group? Make sure that those that you are journeying with in your community at the heart of the ownership of anything that you want to do around community transformation. It's about relationship. Change happens through relationship. People first. So this is an overview really of what the 5Ds are, and when you get back home, about thinking about how you might organise yourselves to go for this process. So I'm going to invite Andy up now, who's just going to take us through a biblical mandate for this process too. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Simon. We just felt it was really important just to unpack, I guess, the biblical framework of why we are doing what we are doing. We're going to look at a short passage from Scriptures for 10 minutes from Luke 5, verses 12 to 21. Luke 5, 12 to 21. While Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered him, "Don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them." And the news spread about him all the more. So the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. One day Jesus was teaching, and Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there. They had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. Some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. When they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and lowered him on the mat through the tiles in the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." The Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" I don't know if there's a thing up here, but in London, they've got various different kind of pubs and cafes and restaurants where you used to have a kind of a men's sign for the men's toilet and a women's for the women's. But that's kind of various different symbols. Have you seen that before or not? Yeah, so you can often that symbol you learn in, well, you're about 8 years old. I always get them mixed up anyway. So I remember going once to the toilet and thinking, which one's the men's, which one's the women's? I think that's the man's. And I walked inside, and I should have realised straight away there were no urinals here. It's probably the wrong one, but I didn't. So I went to a cubicle, and the next thing I heard was some women coming in, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm in the wrong one." And these women weren't there to use the toilets; they were there to put on makeup and to talk. They are chatting away. I'm like, "What do I do?" I'm trying to work out what should I do now. Should I kind of gradually try and slip out the door and kind of sneak away, suspiciously, or should I burst out the door and say, "Hello, I'm here in the wrong cubicle, never mind," and walk out triumphantly? So it's really awkward knowing what to do. What should I do in this moment? And in the end, I went for the subtle approach, and it completely failed when I started screaming. Anyway, there were often these moments where we're not quite sure what to do. For me, there are just 3 things when talking about community transformation. is that we need to do it the way that Jesus did it. And first of all, Jesus looked at how he discerned things. In chapter 5, verse 15, it says, there was so much need. Everyone came to him, and there was so much need. And I guess we're living in a world today, particularly in this moment, when there is so much need. The cost of living crisis, the mental health pandemic, loneliness, people arriving from different places around the world as refugees. What is our role? There is so much need, and sometimes we can become overwhelmed by the need and unsure what to do. And then in chapter 5, verse 21, there was a moment of conflict as the religious leaders begin to speak, saying, actually, you are speaking blasphemy, Jesus. And they begin to really challenge him. And when we begin to do things in our community, there'll be those who end up speaking against us and challenging us. It's not easy doing community transformation. It requires discernment. The first thing is it requires discernment. The second thing is it requires prayer. Chapter 5, verse 16. But Jesus often went alone away to pray. That importance of prayer. That if we're going to do transformation of our places, we have to be a people of prayer. Jesus took time away to pray. Chapters 4, 5, and 6 are full of the most amazing action-packed stuff. And yet all three chapters are punctuated by a verse about Jesus going away to pray. And you might think, well, why did he have to do this? Surely, he was the Son of God and he was experiencing amazing things taking place. But it was so important for him, I think, to model what it means for us today to be people who bring about transformation, that we are people who are praying. We get these great prayers from Jesus in the Bible. The Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done. That prayer in John 17, that we might be one. But 3 times you hear what the Father says back to Jesus. There's one time just before the crucifixion in John 12, when God the Father affirms the mission of Jesus. But the 2 other times, the transfiguration and the baptism, and both times the Father says, this is my Son whom I love. And I wonder if even Jesus had to be continually reminded again of just who he was, of his true identity. And as you begin to look at the community, how we'll make a difference in the community, as we begin to try and work out and discern what we should be doing, is vital we are praying to remember who we are called to be, who we are made in God's image, that we are loved by him. Community transformation the Jesus way requires discernment and requires prayer. And thirdly, it requires vision. Often we think about vision being our 5-year or our 10-year vision, but this I want to draw that idea that vision is about seeing things really clearly. Just popping out, is it? Oh, hello. Switch mics. No one noticed. Good stuff. The third thing is about vision. Often we think about it being a 5-year or 10-year vision, but I love the idea that Jesus saw what was important. That there were these moments where the guy with leprosy falls on the floor before him. It appears that Jesus that morning didn't say, right, let's find a leper. But actually a leper falls in front of him. And the second story, he's in this crowded room when lowered through the roof is the paralyzed man. And actually, can you imagine being the person there in charge of health and safety? Like, what are you doing? Health and safety? This is definitely broken our protocol. But he's lowered down, and both times interruptions, which Jesus sees as being opportunities because he is so people-focused. He sees the needs of the people in front of him. And he sees not only the needs, but he sees the needs behind the needs. The man covered in leprosy. Not only does he heal him, but he touches him. And he helps him connect again with the temple, becoming part of that religious community again. And the man who's for the roof, he says, your sins are forgiven. Again, the idea that he sees the deeper need the man has as he's lowered through the roof. I think if we're going to do the idea of community transformation, then it requires discernment. There are so many needs, but what are we going to discern? What is God calling us to do in this moment? Second of all, it requires prayer. This whole 5D process has to be undergirded with prayer. And third of all, it requires vision. We need to really see the people we're working with, to see not just the superficial needs, but the beneath the needs, and to see sometimes the interruptions are in fact opportunities.